I'm Dawn. I'm an avid horsewoman and I've been riding my whole life. I'm here to introduce True Partnership, the McChesney method with Erin McChesney. Horses are fascinating and complex animals. So whether at home or away with your horses, it's important to know certain procedures for their care and the correct way in dealing with them. That's where Erin comes in. She's been training horses for over 40 years and has her own clinics and training programs. She discusses topics that all equestrians can benefit from. I'm Dawn Kerr, and I hope you enjoy True Partnership, the McChesney method with Erin McChesney.
Hi, I'm Erin McChesney. Welcome to True Partnership. Today we're going to talk about leg wrapping. Horses need their legs wrapped for any number of reasons. It could just be that you're going to be trailering them, stalling them overnight, or maybe they have an injury and they need a particular type of leg wrap. But it's very specific. You have to have a very specific way to wrap so that you don't cause an injury from it. So we're going to talk about what's the appropriate way to wrap, what kind of materials we can use, and what kind of applications we can use, whether it's a type of poultice or it's a liniment or other types of methods that we can use to help the horse, depending on what your veterinarian has recommended or what you already know is your normal practice to maintain good leg health in your horses. The horse we're using today is Tahoe. He's a 19-year-old Arabian gelding. He's done a lot of endurance, he's done a lot of other riding, and been just a good saddle horse for his entire life. He's kind of a wiggly horse, so we're going to work around that because with how I handle and manage my horses, I always meet them where they are. So we'll meet Tahoe where he is to use today to show how to use these different kinds of leg wraps. And of course, who doesn't like a butt scratch? So we're going to talk about standing bandages. A standing bandage means that the horse is being wrapped without a liniment or a clay or a poultice, without any kind of menthol or sweat. It's a dry wrap that we put on the horse's legs so that they can keep the inflammation down in their legs. A lot of standing bandages are used because horses are stalled overnight, or they're stalled for long periods of time, or they're going to be trailered long distances, and we're trying to keep that inflammation down by keeping some pressure on the leg. It's kind of the same like a compression sock that people use after surgeries, or sometimes older folks wear compression socks at night to keep that inflammation down in their lower legs. So we have a couple of ways to put a standing bandage on. Most times people use a quilt, which is a soft material that we're going to wrap around the leg. I have two different quilts here to show you, only because one is taller than the other one. It's really important that the height of the quilt is the right size for the horse's leg so we don't cause an injury. Sometimes people use a disposable quilt. This is actually a batting of cotton that they use to put a wrap on for a standing bandage, and that's kind of a good option too if you don't want to wash these and deal with these, and maybe the standing bandage is only for a couple of events. You can also use rolls of cotton. This is called cotton batting, and we'll peel this off and then rip it at the right size that we want, and this sometimes is used for a standing bandage as well. The type of wrap that holds these on, because they won't stay on by themselves, is called a turf knit or a track bandage. Some turf knits are kind of stretchy, so that will change how you will use that particular wrap when you put it on the other horse's leg. sometimes they're a little more stiff and rigid, and that will also be something to take in consideration when you're putting the wrap on. So let's start by finding out which size quilt, because I'm going to use the quilts for our demonstration with Tahoe, which one's the right height for his leg. So when we go to measure this, we're going to visually look to see if it hits kind of the middle of his knee and goes below his pastern just a little bit. But we don't want this to go way down here to the cornet band, and we don't want it above his knee either. This one's the taller one, and if we put it on there just to see visually, we can see that it hits him about the middle of the knee and comes down just below the bottom of the pastern. So that looks like pretty good height right there. This is the one that's not as tall. Oh, bud. So we're going to put this one on. We can see that this one fits pretty close, about the same as well. I don't like the ridge that it's developed on the top here, even though my wrap won't be over that. I still kind of think that that slightly taller one is going to be better for him. So we're going to use that one to start with. So this was our more stretchy track bandage or turf knit. So we'll notice on the horse's legs that the cannon bone is very solid, but in the back there's these spaces where you have the deep flexor tendon and the medial tendon. We're going to use a little bit of that space with this bandage. So I start by getting it the height I want, folding it around and holding it with my fingers. And then the bandage, the quilt will always fold like this underneath. So I want to make sure I tuck that in and it's nice and flat on the inside. If I left that with a fold like this and wrap over it, I'm going to cause an injury to this horse's leg. So I've got to keep that nice and flat. Then I'm just going to roll it all the way around and hold it in place with my fingers. So now I talked about the space where the tendons were. That's because there will be a little bit of folding that happens with this quilt, and I want that folding to happen around that area and not the front of the leg. So I start about 2/3 up from the bottom and go around to get it started. And now I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to go up a couple of wraps to where I'm sort of just below the bottom of his knee there. And then I'm going to go back down, overlapping. Put your foot down, bud. Overlapping about halfway, keeping some tension on this. So you can see I'm smashing down that quilt pretty good until I get down here at the level part of his pastern, and then I get enough left to come back up, just partially. Keep everything flat, hit my Velcro, and now I've got him in a nice dry standing bandage. If I feel this tension-wise and I go where his tendons are, I can easily put my fingers down there, but it feels pretty firm. If I go in the front, it feels a little more firm, but this bandage now will stay in place. If it was too loose, he'll walk around and in no time it'll be down on the ground and he'll be stepping on it and everything else. If it's too tight, I put pressure on those tendons, this big tendon here and even the medial, and I can cause an injury to him if it's too tight. So you should always be able to get your fingers under here, and they should feel firm but not restricting. The other thing to notice is that my overlaps are a little less than half the bandage, all the way up and down, because if I wrap this wrong, so if I take this off, now I want to show you what can happen if I wrap this incorrectly. So I do the same thing, tuck it in, bring it around. And start in the same place, about 2/3 from the bottom, but I'm going to go all the way up to the top, and then I'm going to Put your foot down, bud. Oh, come on now. There you go. And then I'm going to radically start dropping down to the bottom like this. See how I'm coming at this severe angle? Well, what that does is that puts diagonal pressure on the leg in a way that's not good for the horse's tendons. Plus, this wrap is more likely to kind of fall apart by going at it in that way. And you can see where my finish point is up at the top of the leg instead of at the bottom. And now I've got these weird gaps, and when you feel this bandage, it feels tighter than the other one. Although when I pulled it, it felt the same to me when I pulled it putting it on. But if you were able to feel this, you would feel that it's tighter and it's pulling in diagonal ways like this against the tendon, which is going to cause him injury. So we want to make sure when we put these wraps on that we take small passes and only catch about a third of the wrap above where we're going in our next round as we work our way down. Of course, this is a lot harder to do when your wrap isn't rolled, but trying to show you the difference as far as where I am going across, more horizontal to the leg, even though I do have to go a little bit downhill, but more horizontal to the leg as opposed to that aggressive wrap where I'm going down at this extreme angle. We don't want to do that. Don't want to do that. We want to do this. Little chunks all the way down. And that's how you create a standing bandage to help the horse to keep inflammation out of his leg. So now I'm going to show you how to do a standing bandage with a disposable quilt. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to measure the height of this quilt. And we can see that for him, it's going completely over the top of his knee. It's okay down here, but if I really adjust that to where it should be, it goes well above his knee, so it's too tall for him. So I have a couple of options. I can go ahead and wrap over this the way that it is, and then I can use my scissors and cut the tops down so that this is not in the way or causing a problem. I can customize these however I like with a pair of scissors, or you can also tear them, although that can be a little challenging sometimes. So I'll show you what I'm talking about with taking my scissors and customizing this. Same procedure. I'm going to bring it in, hold it a little bit, flatten that inside flap down so that it doesn't bind and get in the way. These disposable quilts will wrinkle up a lot and get like this and folded. You have to be very careful and pay attention that they stay flat as you are putting them on, especially if they're up and over the horse's knee, which is bigger. It's going to cause that kind of puckering. So what I did there is put my thumb where his tendons are so I could fold that excess into that little gap to get it started. I'm not going to go up as high because remember this one is too tall for him. And then as I come around here, I'm going to maintain that same little tuck, kind of like a dart in sewing. I'm going to come down almost to the bottom, but not under his pastern. And then I will have one wrap or so to come back up. And now he's in a nice standing bandage. So this is excess. So what I'm going to do with this is carefully put a couple of cuts in that so that it can fold down and be out of the way. So that's one way I can use a disposable quilt for a standing bandage. Or I could have trimmed all of this off before I put it on. Could have measured it, said, okay, I'm going to cut that top 2 or 3 inches off and get it out of the way. This type of material is really helpful if you're going to do a sweat. So I'm going to be showing you how to sweat a leg, and we'll be using materials like this as a way to demonstrate that. Because when you sweat a leg, it's different than a standing bandage because you're going to create an environment that's warm and moist. So you'll either have to wash your quilts afterwards or throw them away if they're disposable. So let's take a look at a sweat bandage. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate how to do a sweat wrap, and I'm going to use a hind leg, but this is in the way. So there's a very simple way that we can put this tail up that we don't need to have a rubber band or a hair tie. So you split the tail in half, bring this part underneath. So I'm going to go from the right to the left, and then I'm going to bring this one around from the left to the right. And I'm going to keep overlapping these ends of his tail back and forth around the dock of his tail, and keep swapping sides. Then when I get to where I have this leftover piece, I'm going to split this into three. So I'm going to take half or a third of the tail out of my right hand and a third out of my left hand. And now I'm just going to do a regular braid, a regular 3-plait braid. I'm going to braid this all the way down. Pretty snug, not so much that he'd be irritated and starts knocking me in the face with the dock of his tail, but enough that this isn't going to fall out, because I don't want to get all of my applications, poultices or sweat materials or DMSO, whatever it is that I'm using, I don't want to get that all in his tail. And I don't want to be pulling his tail out of the wrap either, because that will happen. Then I've got all these loops of his tail. So I'm going to just pick a loop, and I'm going to go underneath of that loop. I'm going to go over another one and under another one. And now, come on through there, his tail, if I want to ensure it, I can go over one more time and go over the top, kind of loop that. His tail is out of the way, and I didn't need to go get a bandage or a tail wrap or a hair tie or anything. So we've got Tahoe's tail all tucked up and out of the way so that it's not going to get in the middle of what we're going to do to wrap. I'm going to wrap this hind leg. Now he knows that if I lightly tug on his tail towards me, to put that foot down. If his leg is in a rested position, my wrap will be too tight, and then when he stands on it, it'll be really putting a lot of strain on the bottom of his leg. So he knows, and it's important to teach your horses to just a little gentle tug like that over means you got to stand on that leg. So when we sweat a leg, we use something that's warm. There's a couple of options. You can mix DMSO with Furacin. Now this jar is pretty beat up, but trust me, it's nitrofuracin, which is the yellow, yellow type of wound ointment that's been used for a long time. I have to sniff my jars because one is mixed with witch hazel. Witch hazel you can get at a health food store and mix into Furacin to use as a sweat if you want a menthol sweat. So I don't want to mix that one with DMSO. So I've got my other jar of Furacin here. It says Furadress on it. I'm going to sniff. Yep, that one's good. I would put this on as a paste, followed by DMSO onto the leg, and then sweat. So DMSO can be applied topically without gloves. For me, it always makes me very sick to my stomach. So when I'm going to put DMSO on, I always use a glove so that I don't get it through my skin. So how we do a sweat, I guess we're using your other leg now. So how we do a sweat with DMSO and Furacin is we would take a good chunk of this, a big glob, and we're going to just wipe it on there and make a big, thick pass on the leg. Wherever, and we would, sweating, we would put that amount all over the entire leg, okay? So we get this on here, nice and good, thick. We need a little more to make it work. So what the sweat does is it actually makes the leg sweat. And it will pull inflammation out of the areas of the tendons and ligaments and the joints here. But it needs to be absorbed into some kind of absorbent material. So in order to make this sweat hot, I have to use DMSO. So I get a little bit of my DMSO here. And it's cold today, so it's probably going to be like a gel, not come out of there very good. It's actually kind of frozen in there. I'll be darned. So you'll follow along. I would put DMSO on my hand. Oh, there it goes a little bit. This is a liquid DMSO. Then I'm just going to add that on over the top of this. And you will feel, even through a glove, the warmth starting right away when you add a little bit. You don't need a lot of DMSO mixed with Furacin, just enough that you begin to feel that warm reaction happening. So now I get to choose how I would like to have this absorbed. Earlier, I showed you a disposable quilt that was too tall for Tahoe, so I had cut off a section about 2 inches worth to make this the right height for him. That's one option. I can put a quilt on. That's another option. And I can also use what are called bed pads. If you go to a drugstore and you get these bed pads, they have the plastic on the outside, so that keeps that heat in, and the absorption on the inside, which will absorb the sweat that's going to come off of him. But this is entirely too big for my task, so I have to cut it in half. So the nice part about using a bed pad or the disposable quilts, or even if you wanted to sweat into this cotton batting that they can use, and that you would unroll and get a piece off of that, whatever you would need cut to length, is you will throw it away. You don't have to wash it later. So because this material, this bed pad material, isn't very thick, and I don't want to use a turf knit or a track bandage without enough cushion under it, because it could put extra tension on the leg that I don't want to have there. So I might end up using both of these, this one underneath, this one on top. It makes it very challenging. Sometimes you need a couple extra hands to do this. And part of his dancing around is because that leg's getting warm. So he's noticing that. Scoot around, bud. Scoot around. Come on. There you go. A little more. Let's go. Oh, I know. It's so hard to cooperate. Oh, bud. Right there. That's fine. So I'm going to put all of this together. I'm going to put this material on so that it will absorb the action of the heat, and then I'll put my quilt on so that it's cushioned and go from there. Same as a standing bandage though, in terms of tension. I'm going to use the same amount of tension. Hope he's going to cooperate. Now Tahoe's a nerd, so he does lots of silly stuff, and we always have to meet him where he is because he's kind of nerdy. Come on over, bud. There you go. So patience is always a virtue. If a horse is giving you a real hard time, he gets a friend or a partner to pick up another leg and hold it up, and then the horse will be forced to stand on that leg. So that would be a sweat bandage. You can also, if you don't have these bed pads with the plastic material, for the sweat to be really effective, in the old days we had cling wrap. So we would put an absorbent material around the leg of some kind, whether it was a quilt or cotton, and then we would literally wrap the horse's leg in a cling wrap, and then after that put a quilt on, and then put a bandage, a track bandage on. And that is a sweat wrap. So a sweat wrap is something that we might leave on the horse for a few hours or overnight, but you would not leave it on more than 12 hours because it can blister. Blistering is a term in the horse world. It basically means that the skin has become irritated, and now you can't wrap over it because you've irritated the skin. So a sweat should be maybe 4 hours, no more than 12 hours when you put that on, and then you would wash it off when you're done and make sure that you can get all of that sweat material off of there, whatever you used, whether it was a furacin mixed with witch hazel or furacin mixed with DMSO or something else that maybe your vet has that they would recommend to put on there. Okay, so we've washed Tahoe's leg off. He had a sweat wrap on here, which was a combination of furacin and DMSO, and we took that off. And now I'm going to show you how to do a poultice wrap. So a poultice wrap is using a clay or this really fancy stuff that's pink and smells really bad, but works really, really good. But for today's purposes, we'll just use a regular clay. I like to use gloves when I put the clay on, just because it's really messy. And it keeps me from spending 10 minutes over there trying to wash this off. So same process, big globs of clay. Right now he's not putting weight on this leg, but it doesn't matter because I'm just putting this clay on here. So the clay absorbs and reduces inflammation, plus it has a little menthol in it, so it has kind of that nice soothing action of menthol. We put it on really, really thick. And a clay wrap or a poultice wrap, in order for it to really be effective, needs to stay on for 12 hours. And again, we have our choices. Do we want to use a quilt? Do we want to use a disposable quilt? Do we want to use cotton? The cotton batting, which I showed you earlier, which is just a roll of cotton like this, and then you would trim it off wherever you want. I generally don't use that one with clay because it gets stuck to it, and then you have these globs of cotton stuck to your horse's leg. I prefer to use a quilt. This is the leg that Tahoe injured earlier this year, and so I'm going to go ahead and leave this wrap on for the remainder of our show today. So he's standing really close together. My turf bandage, my turf net, is not going to make it between his legs the way he is, so I'm going to have to move him, but of course he's always helping because he's always on the move. So same process, and we don't want him resting that leg. We want him to be standing on it. Good boy. Bring this around, tuck it in. The nice part about a clay wrap is your quilt will stick to his leg, so it stays there a little easier for you. And again, a clay wrap or a poultice wrap can stay on for 12 hours. And then you take it off and rinse the leg off and wash it really good. Same thing, about 1/3 of each pass is showing as I wrap over it to get down to the bottom. Get to the end, put my Velcro on, and now his leg's got a nice poultice wrap. And that's why I wanted this tail out of my way, because otherwise it would be full of clay right now if it was hanging down where I was working. So Tahoe's got a really nice clay poultice wrap on his leg. Very soothing. It'll be on there until tomorrow at this time when I'll take it off. There's a couple other methods that I could use to offer the horse some comfort to his legs. This wrap here, this quilt, actually has little magnets in it, and it's called a magnetic wrap, and a lot of people use these. I've used magnetic wraps also, but I generally don't leave them on for more than about 4 hours, because after about 4 hours, it doesn't appear that you get much more out of it to try to reduce inflammation and stimulate the leg. But we are going to use an ice boot, and I have a couple different ones to show you. This boot goes in the freezer and stays there until I'm ready to use it. And when we open it up, we see that it has all these little pockets with ice in there. And they're pretty firm when you first take it out of the refrigerator or out of the freezer, but they do soften up a little bit. The thing about ice to remember is that ice is 20 minutes and then you take it off. After 20 minutes, then you need to walk your horse and help to take that inflammation that's reduced and the coolness of the leg that's been created by the ice, which is therapeutic, and then let the horse walk to get that circulation going while the inflammation is down. But if any more than 20 minutes with ice, you actually start to reverse the process, because then what happens is the body starts resisting the cold and starts kind of reloading the leg with inflammation. So this is going to look like I'm really wrenching on it, but it's because it's got very, very elastic straps. And Tahoe is okay with this boot, usually for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then he's had enough of it, and he starts smacking his foot on the ground. And again, there's his nerdiness. He's always picking his leg up. Put your foot down, buddy. See if I can get him to stand on this side. Come on. Good boy. And it kind of slid down on me, so I'm going to have to hold it up, get another wrap on it, and he's going to make this very challenging. So let's just get this on, get these straps out of the way. It's not where I want it to be right now, but at least I can manipulate it now. Good boy, Ho. So now that he's standing on it, I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to readjust these middle straps before I go to the ones on the end. And get that pretty snug. I can still get my fingers in here, but I need that ice to stay close to his skin. So we'd leave that on for 20 minutes and take it off. If in 10 minutes he starts wrapping his foot on the ground and really acting irritated by it, I'm going to take it off earlier, because if I'm using it to get inflammation down in the horse's leg, the last thing I need is for him to be smacking an injured leg on the ground really hard. So if he starts saying, "I've had enough of that ice on my leg, Mom," then we're going to say, "Okay," and we're going to take it off like that. He's kind of done with it already, yep. And it might be because we had a sweat on that leg earlier. And you see, the other thing that happens, I'm kind of glad he's doing that. See how my boot's starting to fall down? So this is a great, let me get out of the way so I don't get kicked. This is a great demonstration of what'll happen with our boots. Now you notice when I put that back on, I gave it some pretty good snug wraps, but look how much it slid down already. It's come down from here to here just by him shaking his leg a few times. If this was improperly wrapped and was too loose, and he started doing the same thing, this wrap would be starting to slide down his leg too. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, is that we can do the best we can to try to get those boots to stay in place, but sometimes the horse wins on that one. This type of ice boot is the kind you actually pour ice into, and it has a front boot and a back boot, the front one being shorter than this one. Depends on the height of your horse too. You gonna manage that, or you want me to get that off of you, buddy? He says, "I don't know about this. You may have gone too far today." Have we gone too far with you today? Yeah, okay. So this boot, kind of a funny shaped boot. And we put this one on. Not too tight, but it's going to be a little more snug on the bottom. We can bring it down below the pastern a little bit. It's got some extra closures up here. We're going to bring it out so it's nice and loose. Got a pocket here. We want to have that little pocket in place and close that up because we're actually going to dump ice into that pocket. Got my bag of ice. And I'm sure that Tahoe is not going to like this. He's only had this done maybe once before, many years ago. He's 19, remember, he's got a lot of experience, but even still. So we shake some ice down in there, into that boot, and then just let it go until it melts. And in about 15 or 20 minutes, all that ice would melt, and we'd be done icing his leg. And the icing is to reduce inflammation. It's usually used when we have ridden our horses or competed on them or done something kind of strenuous, and we know that, you know, that horse would benefit from getting those tendons cooled down to keep them nice and tight. So that's how that boot would operate. He's tolerating it pretty good. I spoke too soon. You're such a silly horse. I know. And sometimes they don't like the noise of it. So you notice he's reacting to the noise of the ice. So whatever method of icing that you use, or any kind of leg wraps for that matter, we have to practice it at home. Okay, so one of the things to keep in mind is we want to practice these things at home. Tahoe's had enough of this ice boot here. So we're going to take this off so that he doesn't injure himself from that excessive kicking, and he doesn't injure anybody around him. I know, buddy. There you go. And the other boot that has the ice in it makes noise. Remember that ice is going to move around in there and make noise? It might even fall out. There's some ice cubes on the ground over here. So we want to practice that at home before we try it, you know, when we go out to an event or a horse show or something, so the horse knows what to expect and they don't have the stress of being in an unusual environment on top of it. So these moments that Tahoe's having where he's a little agitated and little ants in his pants and kicking and pawing and so forth is very normal, but we want to be able to make sure that we can help him to understand that that level of normal is okay. So let me grab that other ice boot and get that one off of him. So normally when I would take this boot off, all the ice would be melted, so there wouldn't be anything falling out of it. But in this case, we're going to have a little pile of ice here under his leg. But again, to practice that, if you use this method of icing, so the horse is used to it and they're not upset by the sound and the feel of it. And some horses don't tolerate ice very well, and if you find that that's the case, you may have to find another method of cooling the leg down. So let's talk about how we can do that. Liniments cool the leg down. This is Bigeloil oil. I've used this since I was a kid. I don't actually wear gloves when I put Bigeloil oil on because it doesn't bother me. It might bother you, so I would always check a liniment first before you start to use it. The other one is a mineral ice. This is that blue cooling gel that you can actually wrap on the top of this one and not worry about blistering. This liniment is much milder, and at first it goes on warm and then it gets cold and it stays cold for a while. Sometimes we use this type of liniment after a heavier workout or conditioning ride. Just put it on the legs from the hocks to the pasterns and from the knees to the pasterns, just so that the leg will air cool and it will pick up the outside air temperature and get colder. So we can cool the leg down this way if icing is not working, or we can use a liniment like Bigeloil oil. There's other liniments out there off the top of my head, like absorbing, things of that nature. This has a higher menthol amount in it, and you would not want to wrap over the top of this because it could cause blistering. And blistering would mean that the horse's skin would be irritated and could be harmed by that. So I'm going to show you what I do with Bigeloil oil with Tahoe. I have taught him how to position his leg to get the maximum impact from Bigeloil oil, or a liniment for that matter. So where we're going to use this, oh buddy, is this region right here, down through the pastern, almost all the way down to the foot. So this whole section in here is what we're going to work on. and I'm using this straight. Sometimes people use Bigeloil oil mixed with water to dilute it a little bit, and it's called a brace when you do that. So I'm going to let that soak against his skin. I've brought a step stool over here for a reason, because I'm going to sit next to him and work on this leg. Come here, bud. Can you move your bum over just a little? Just a little. There you go. Oh, bud. So now I'm going to rub this into the joints and the leg and follow the contours of his leg. Oh, buddy. And then for him, he knows that I can hold his leg like this, and now the deep flexor and medial tendon is very soft, and I can manipulate that and hold his leg and really massage that all the way up into his knee, where these tendons and ligaments are nice and loose. So what I've done is I've put Bigeloil oil on Tahoe's leg, and now we can see how loose this deep flexor and medial tendon is. And then these ligaments, these suspensory ligaments on the side now are easier to get to and to massage and manipulate. And he's been taught to be okay with this, and sometimes we have to start over and reset, and that's okay. Oh, buddy. Walk up, please. Walk up. There you go. So when his leg is down, I can do this quick manipulation, stimulating that leg with the liniment on there to get some really good heat going. Again, I'm not ever going to wrap over Bigeloil oil because that will cause a blister, which means that the skin will get irritated. Pick it up. Pick it up, bud. Oh my goodness. Says I can't. Not on camera. So the other thing I've taught him is to rest his toe so that I can really work these tendons. See how much they bend and they fold? So he knows that if he rests his toe like that, that I can really get in there, especially up in here in the back of his knee and the carpals, and massage all of that. And he's not going to hold it there 100% of the time, and that's okay. Come on, bud. Because it's a process. It's a horse, not a bicycle. So I just finished talking about rubbing the leg with the Bigeloil oil or a liniment. It does take time. I'll do an episode where we just talk about how to train the horse to do that, so that he'll learn to rest a toe and so forth and be comfortable with you doing that massage and therapeutic work on their legs at a different time. But the last thing I want to talk about are polo wraps. Polo wraps are very stretchy, made out of a polar fleece material. They're usually designed specifically to be used when we are riding and training our horses as a way to protect the horse's legs so that they don't hit themselves as they are traveling. A polo wrap could be used for everything we talked about today, but a polo wrap is not a good measure to leave on for an extended period of time, like 4 hours, 12 hours, because it will be a little uneven underneath because it's not put on with a quilt or a pad. So it's just to protect the horse's legs while you are asking them to work, like you're putting them in the round pen and lunging them, or you're schooling in the arena or something of that nature, and you're not using an interference boot, you're choosing to use a polo wrap instead. But it goes on the same way as a track bandage does, or a turf knit. We're going to start a little bit below the height of the wrap when it's going to be finished. We're going to go up first. Hold still, bud. And then we're going to just do a third and a third and a third all the way down to the bottom. And this time the polo wraps are a little longer. You're going to get a second wrap around the pastern before you come back up. Oh, this one got rolled backwards. So I'm going to flip this over just to show you how it closes. And then it's on there, and it's a nice, soft, cushiony way to protect the horse's leg so that if they hit or interfere, they've got a nice soft cushion to protect them. And it's a stretchy wrap, so even though it's on pretty snug, it's pretty stretchy too, but it would not work as a standing bandage or for sweating or poulticing and so forth. So good job today, Tahoe. He did a lot. So thank you so much for watching True Partnership, the McChesney Method. I'm Erin McChesney, and always remember to meet your horses where they are. Please send your questions, comments, and suggestions for further episodes to Twitter at True Partnership, the McChesney Method, or via email truepartnershipmcchesney@gmail.com. And remember to always meet your horses where they are.